October 1962. A single decision could destroy civilization. Not a city, not a country, civilization itself. American military commanders were preparing for war. Soviet nuclear missiles were being deployed. Nuclear bombers sat ready on runways. Submarines carrying atomic weapons moved silently beneath the ocean. And somewhere in the White House, President John F. Kennedy received information that changed everything. The world had entered the most dangerous 13 days in human history, and nobody knew if they would survive. After World War II ended, two superpowers emerged: the United States and the Soviet Union. Both possessed enormous military power. Both distrusted each other. Both feared the other's influence. What followed became known as the Cold War, a global struggle fought through politics, espionage, technology, and military competition. But there was one terrifying difference. Both sides now possessed nuclear weapons. Weapons capable of destroying entire cities within minutes. Just 90 miles from Florida, a revolution transformed Cuba. In 1959, Fidel Castro seized power. Relations with America quickly deteriorated. Economic sanctions followed. Political tensions increased. Soon, Cuba turned toward Moscow. The Soviet Union saw opportunity. America saw danger. The island would soon become the center of a global crisis. In 1961, the United States backed an operation known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. The goal was simple: remove Castro. The result was disastrous. The invasion failed. Castro survived, and Cuba moved even closer to the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev reached a dangerous conclusion. If America could threaten Cuba, then the Soviet Union needed a way to protect it. In complete secrecy, the Soviet Union launched a mission called Operation Anadyr. Thousands of soldiers crossed oceans. Missile launch systems were transported secretly. Nuclear warheads followed. Entire military units moved toward Cuba. The operation was disguised so effectively that many participants didn't even know their real destination. The goal? Place nuclear missiles close enough to strike American cities. For the first time, Washington, New York, and much of the eastern United States would be only minutes away from destruction. October 14, 1962. An American U-2 spy plane flew high above Cuba. The photographs it captured shocked intelligence analysts. Construction sites, missile launch pads, military equipment. The evidence was unmistakable. Soviet nuclear missiles were being installed in Cuba. The photographs soon reached President Kennedy. Inside the White House, silence filled the room, because everyone understood what those images meant. The balance of power had suddenly changed. Kennedy gathered his closest advisors. Military leaders demanded immediate action. Some recommended airstrikes. Others called for a full invasion. Every option carried enormous risk. Destroy the missiles? The Soviet Union might retaliate. Invade Cuba? Nuclear war could begin. Do nothing? America would live under direct nuclear threat. There was no perfect solution. Only dangerous choices. The White House created a secret committee. Every hour brought new intelligence. Every meeting increased tension. Meanwhile, millions of Americans had no idea how close they were to catastrophe. Schools remained open. Businesses continued operating. Families lived normal lives. But inside government buildings, officials quietly prepared for a possible nuclear conflict. And time was running out. October 22nd. Kennedy addressed America on television. Millions watched. Millions listened. He revealed the existence of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. The announcement stunned the world. Then came the next shock. America would establish a naval quarantine around Cuba. No additional Soviet military equipment would be allowed through. The crisis had now become public, and global fear exploded overnight. American warships moved into position. Soviet cargo ships approached the blockade. The world watched anxiously. What would happen if the ships continued forward? Would America fire? Would the Soviet Union respond? For several terrifying hours, humanity waited. Then, something unexpected happened. Several Soviet vessels slowed down. Some turned back. For the moment, war had been avoided. But the crisis was far from over. October 27th, 1962. Often called Black Saturday. The most dangerous day of the entire crisis. An American U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba. The pilot was killed. Military commanders demanded retaliation. At the same time, another U-2 accidentally entered Soviet airspace. Fighter jets were scrambled. Nuclear forces moved closer to readiness. The situation was spiraling out of control. One wrong move could start World War III. Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, an event occurred that remained hidden for years. A Soviet submarine carrying a nuclear torpedo was surrounded by American naval forces. Communication with Moscow had been lost. The crew believed war might already have begun. Officers considered launching the nuclear weapon. Had they done so, the result could have triggered global nuclear conflict. But one officer objected. His decision may have saved millions of lives, perhaps even civilization itself. Behind the scenes, messages moved between Washington and Moscow. Kennedy and Khrushchev searched desperately for a solution. Neither wanted war. Both feared appearing weak. Eventually, a compromise emerged. The Soviet Union would remove missiles from Cuba. In return, America would pledge not to invade Cuba. A second secret agreement also took shape, one hidden from the public for years. Slowly, the missiles were dismantled. Soviet ships carried equipment away. The immediate danger began fading. For the first time in nearly 2 weeks, the world could breathe again. But leaders on both sides had learned a terrifying lesson. Nuclear weapons had brought humanity closer to destruction than ever before. And next time, luck might not be enough. The Cuban Missile Crisis lasted only 13 days, yet those 13 days changed history forever. They revealed how fragile peace can be, how quickly fear can spread, and how a handful of decisions can determine the fate of billions. Today, many people know the name. Few understand how close the world came to nuclear war. But in October 1962, humanity stood on the edge of the abyss, and somehow stepped back. The public believed the crisis had ended with a simple agreement. Soviet missiles out. American pressure successful. Crisis over. But history was more complicated. Behind closed doors, a secret agreement had been reached. At the time, the United States had nuclear missiles stationed in Turkey. From Moscow's perspective, those missiles posed the same threat that Cuban missiles posed to Washington. Privately, President John F. Kennedy agreed to remove American Jupiter missiles from Turkey. The arrangement remained secret for years. Why? Because both sides needed to claim victory. And during the Cold War, appearances mattered almost as much as reality.
As years passed, more classified documents became public. Historians began uncovering shocking details. The world learned that there were more Soviet troops in Cuba than previously believed. More nuclear weapons, more launch systems, more military readiness. Some commanders on the island already possessed authority to use tactical nuclear weapons under certain circumstances. This revelation stunned experts, because it meant the danger had been even greater than leaders understood at the time. Humanity had come closer to nuclear war than almost anyone realized.
One story emerged above all others. A Soviet submarine commander had been under immense pressure. American ships dropped practice depth charges intended as warning signals. Inside the submarine, the crew believed war might already have started. Temperatures were rising. Communication had failed. Stress was overwhelming. Some officers wanted to launch a nuclear torpedo. One officer resisted. His refusal prevented a decision that could have triggered global catastrophe. History often remembers presidents and generals, but sometimes the fate of the world rests with one person nobody knows. Imagine a different outcome. An American airstrike destroys missile sites in Cuba. Soviet forces retaliate. NATO responds. Warsaw Pact forces mobilize. Nuclear weapons begin launching across continents. Major cities disappear within hours. Millions die. Governments collapse. The global economy ceases to function. Experts later ran simulations of possible outcomes. Many concluded that a full nuclear exchange would have changed human civilization forever. The world we know today might not exist.
While leaders debated war, ordinary Americans felt growing fear. People stocked food supplies. Families discussed emergency plans. Schools practiced civil defense drills. Bomb shelters suddenly became important. Newspapers published alarming headlines. Television broadcasts fueled uncertainty. For 13 days, an invisible countdown seemed to hang over the country. Nobody knew what tomorrow would bring. And that uncertainty created fear unlike anything most people had ever experienced. The fear was not limited to America. Inside the Soviet Union, citizens also faced uncertainty. Military units entered higher states of readiness. Government officials monitored developments constantly. Radio broadcasts delivered updates. Families worried about what might happen next. Many people on both sides shared the same fear. They wanted peace. Yet decisions were being made by leaders separated by thousands of miles. The future depended on diplomacy surviving pressure. The Cuban Missile Crisis shocked both superpowers. Afterward, leaders realized how dangerous poor communication could be. A misunderstanding, a delayed message, a military accident. Any of these could start a war nobody wanted. As a result, new communication systems were established. Most famously, the Washington-Moscow Hotline, a direct line between leaders. Its purpose was simple: ensure future crises could be managed before spiraling out of control. Ironically, the crisis did not end nuclear competition. Both nations continued expanding their arsenals. More missiles, more submarines, more bombers, more destructive power. The Cold War continued for decades, yet the memory of October 1962 remained powerful. Leaders never forgot how close they had come to disaster. The shadow of those 13 days influenced military strategy for generations. Many people view the Cuban Missile Crisis as ancient history, but its lessons remain relevant. Modern nations still possess nuclear weapons. Global tensions still exist. Military confrontations still occur. Technology has changed. The risks have not.
The crisis reminds us that powerful nations can reach dangerous moments surprisingly fast. And when nuclear weapons are involved, every decision matters. October 1962. Just 13 days. Yet those 13 days became the most dangerous period in human history. Missiles stood ready. Warships faced each other across the ocean. Pilots waited for orders. Submarines carried weapons capable of changing the world forever. And millions of ordinary people continued living their lives, unaware of how close civilization stood to the edge. History remembers the Cuban Missile Crisis as a victory for diplomacy, a moment when leaders chose restraint over destruction. But it is also a warning, because peace is often more fragile than it appears. And sometimes, the future of humanity can depend on a single decision made in a single room on a single day. The world survived those 13 days. The question is, would it survive them again?